Hi everyone, my name is Sarah. I'm a freelance animator and motion designer located in St. Louis, Missouri. I'd like to send out a huge thank you to Maxon and Matthias for giving me this honor to be here. I am so excited to be here and I can't wait to show what I have in store for all of you. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and check out my latest reel.
And I'm on a roll. Hey, 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 hey. You thought it was a sonic boom, 'cause I have the loudest style in the room. You thought you were in paradise, and you know what? You just might be. Huh? They wanna shake things up, but we got it under control, yeah. They thought I was all shook up, but I got it. Yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm on a roll.
So that was my reel. Again, I just want to say a huge thank you to Maxon and Matthias for inviting me to be here. I am so excited, so let's get this ball rolling. I'm sure that about 99.9% of you have no idea who I am or anything about me, so I'm going to give you a little bit more of my background. I grew up in a very small town called Labadie. It's about an hour outside of St. Louis. I grew up fishing, climbing trees, digging for dinosaurs because I wanted to be a paleontologist, which sounds like I had a very active imagination, and I do, but actually there are a lot of fossils around where my parents are. I would find rocks with, like seashells. I didn't find dinosaurs. I found, prehistoric fish and crustaceans and stuff like that. Stuff that's cool, but not that cool. All right, so I always loved art. In high school, I took every single art class they had, which there was a lot. The only one I didn't take was wood carving. That didn't really interest me. Then I went to the University of Central Missouri, which actually isn't central. It's closer to Kansas City. And I started out as an illustration major. And my sophomore year, I switched to graphic design. And I got a minor in creative writing. There was one class when I was there. There was one class for motion design. And I didn't take it. There was an option to take that or HTML coding, and I thought I would get more use out of the coding class, which I didn't. So, yeah. After college, I then graduated, and I worked at a publication for years, and when there wasn't really any way for me to move up, and it just wasn't very challenging for me anymore. I was towards the end, when my boss was on maternity leave, I was doing her job and my job, and I was just like, I can do this with my eyes closed now. So I started looking for a new job. And during that time, I created a website for myself, and I made my first little intro animation, which was very, very simple. It is nothing exciting, but I was like, that was really fun. So when I got my new job, what had come up during the interview was that I was interested in learning some more motion and animation. And Brian Singler worked with me. He is a colorist at Bruton Strobey now. And he was very supportive. And so what I did was I watched a bunch of tutorials. I just made something. And I was working at a health supplement company. So I made something super simple, yet it was super hard for my Mac with 4 gigabytes of RAM to handle because I used Liquify in After Effects, which is crazy to do. There was a lot of moving something and then just waiting like 5 minutes Well, maybe not 5 minutes, but it felt like 5 minutes for the computer to catch up, and then I would move something again. And so I made something, and then I just presented it to my boss. I was like, look, we can do like these little animated things for social media. And the things I made just got so much more engagement than anything else. So I sort of built my job into being able to explore motion design. And then they actually paid for me to take a couple After Effects classes, which were at St. Louis Community College. They do these like full day. So it's just like a full day. There was 2 full days where I spent learning about After Effects. And the first one, I basically already knew all the basics, so that class was really easy. The second class, I learned a couple new tricks. And then after that, I still remember the first 3D animation that I saw that made me want to learn Cinema 4D. And it was this PayPal animation, and everything was still flat and like paper and moving around. And I thought, wow, that is really cool. And since we had a copy of Cinema 4D, I went down the hall to Brian Singler's office and got it and installed it on my Mac and started messing around with that. And then they paid for me to take a class from Grayscale Gorilla with David Brodere. That's actually where I first learned all the animation principles. At the end of that class, I made my first reel, and I landed a full-time position at Vidzu. And I was there for almost 3 years, and now I'm full-time freelance. So that's basically my journey to where I am now. So before I dive into the overview of what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to explain part of the title. So panning for gold is an actual thing. Like if you Google it, it's, you have a pan and you're dipping it into a river or a stream and sifting through the soil looking for gold. If you have watched The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, a man is panning for gold. So that's a good recent example of how it works. When I say panning for gold, I'm referring to the technique I was taught by my creative writing teacher in high school. His name is Chuck Bright. The basic idea is that you just sit down with your pad of paper and whatever writing utensil you prefer, and you just keep writing. You write about anything that comes to mind, and you just write and write and write until you come up with a good idea or strike gold. So this is a technique that I have applied to my personal projects, and I'll get more into this as we go along. This is the overview of what I'm going to be covering today. We're going to start off with my sea monster animation, which I have called Hook, and we're going to just cover basically everything about that short. Then we're going to cover a little bit of my Yellow Submarine animation, where I'll talk about using Trapcode Particular in post, as well as how to create giant kelp. Then we're going to finish off with my Uoma Black Magic Lipstick animation, and I'll show you how to make some really fluffy 3D feathers. All right, let's get the ball rolling and watch Hook. All right, so that was Hook. And the backstory of Hook was I was using daily inspiration things like, there's like, oh, it's pizza day or whatever. Well, it was fishing month. So I created this 3-part series. I started off making the hook first, then I did the head, then I finished off the body and created Cece. Yes, Cece the sea serpent. She's based off an anglerfish and eel. And if you know anything about anglerfish, you know she has to be female. And if you're curious about that, I will answer that in the Q&A. But we got to keep going. So I created the series and I thought, hey, this would be a really cool short. So I sketched it out and then I created this animatic, and I'll just scrub through it. So it stayed pretty true to how it ended up. There's just one more scene that was added, and the fish weren't originally in my storyboard. They were added in. Cece was a little bit more curling when she came up because I liked the idea of her being like curled like a snake. That didn't really work out with my rig, so she's more kind of swimming up. But yeah, and there's the swim by and the bite. And then the post-credit scene, which also changed a little bit. So that is my very simple sketched out animatic. So I made the animatic and then I started modeling all the pieces. Everything that's in here is all modeled by me. I didn't use any stock. I made everything, even the fish. All right, so this is my main CC rig. This is actually where I tested her rigging. So if I press play, you can see how she moves. Now, the cool thing about this rigging setup is that I'm actually only animating this spine joint right here. It's all dynamically linked with IK, and see the dynamics is enabled, and these are the settings. But so it is enabled from this joint all the way to the joint at the end, and there are 80 plus joints in this thing. So she is long and complex, but actually, like animating wise, it's pretty simple because all I'd have to do is animate this point and then animate the joints for her mouth. All right, so that is the main CC rig. Now that you've seen how she's set up, let's go ahead and build one together. So let's do File, New Project. Let's go ahead and just grab out a cone. Yeah, let's grab out a cone. And we'll rotate it 90 degrees. I was holding down Shift. It helps you snap. Let's make it really long. Let's make this end a little bit less ginormous. Okay, let's switch to quick shading with lines. And we're not going to go too crazy, but we're going to need more height segments than that. Okay, let's go ahead and throw that into a subdivision surface. Cool. All right, I'm gonna go into our views and we're gonna go, we'll start with the right. Character, joint tool. I'm gonna throw one here. There we go. You gotta hold down Control to get the first one there. And let's turn off the subdivision surface. It's making it too complicated. Okay. I'm gonna put one at every break. And I know they're not all perfectly aligned, but we will fix that soon. Let's see how many joints we end up with. Yeah, we'll do 2. There we go. All right, so we've got 24 joints. This thing, which I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's gonna look creepy after we rig it and make it move around. let's select all the joints. Joint align tool. Let's jump into another view. Okay. Let's start clicking through. See? Yep. They're all pointing up. They're all aligned. That's important. That's just good practice for good rigging. All right. So that's happened. Now, let's go ahead and make this cone editable. We can turn the subdivision surface back on. Let's select that. So I'm going to click this. I'm going to select children. Close that. Also, select that. And back into character. Bind. And now, let's double check. Yeah, it's going to freak out because yeah, that's not really what we want to do, but that's a good way to check that, yeah, they are connected now. Okay. Now I'm going to click this. Rigging tags, an IK tag, and basic tag end is going to be joint 24. I'm going to add a goal. And there's the goal. If I move that, things happen. All right, but I know it's not doing that undulating thing that it was doing before. Let's go back in here, and that's because we need to enable dynamics. Now, do that, and then I move this, and it moves around. Not very well. It's kind of falling a lot. I'm going to pump up the drag. Let's move it back down. If we press play, you'll see that it's moving around a bit. Rotation hold. I think we had that at 80. Drag at 100%. And let's move it this way and see what happens. There we go. So that's looking pretty cool. We can also move this to make it work. Since we have a goal. Creepy. Tentacly. Alright. So that's the basic idea of how I rigged CC. So if you guys use that and start making creepy tentacles or snakes or something, be sure to tag me because I'd love to see it because those are fun. Okay, let's move on. So you're probably thinking, wow, this is a really cool rig. And it is. But there are some drawbacks. So I'm going to show you that now. Let's go to scene 6. Scene 6 is what I call the money shot, and this is where she goes in and bites the hook. Now the problem with the CC rig, the main rigging, is that I have to do all sorts of wackadoodle things to get her in the correct position that I want her to be in. So you can see there's 100 frames until she actually gets to the position that I want her to be in. That's where I render. So you can watch. She has to do all these things, and no one sees this but me. But getting her into that correct position was a lot of, oh, let's try moving her a little bit more this way. Let's try moving her down over here so that way when she goes in, the coil doesn't go through the camera. Because it did happen a few times where her body was placed too high and it would go right through the camera, which doesn't look good. So here we go. This is the good shot. because we've got that really nice curl of her body, and then she's going up, and I really love this coil, kind of like a snake positioning that I managed to create. But so that is the downside of the IK dynamic rigging that I created for this. So I'm sure now you're probably wondering, how did I get CC to flip the boat over? That was done with a different rig. I rigged her 2 different ways. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the tracer system, but let's go to hook scene 7 only. And it's called that because I had scene 7 and the insert scene together. And then when I went in and did the X particle splash system that I set up, I didn't need that for the insert scene, which is what I called the scene that was added, which is, Seamus is, just fishing, having no idea while, CC is swimming upwards to get that hook. That was the insert scene. To get CC to hit the boat, I set her up with a tracer rigging, and I'm going to go more into depth of that. But to see the general idea is, so a tracer basically creates a spline using the points of nulls. And I'll show you, we'll set something up together real fast, and so you can get a better idea. But what's cool about that, so I have, CC, and she is actually rigged with a spline warp that is using a tracer. So if I click on null 8, let's go ahead and get to where she pops up, and you can see the path of the null. Let's wait for it to catch up. So that is rig number 2 of CC. And what's funny is both of these setups are combined into one rig, and that is for the fishing rod. So the fishing rod has joints, but then it also has all these nulls. So I modeled the fishing rod because, as I said, I modeled everything. So yeah, so I bend it by just pushing it back, and it creates that bend. It's not perfect, and it kind of doesn't, so it's a lot of bending it, it's a lot of pushing it back and then moving it down so it doesn't get too wonky back here. But whenever it's bending, we're not really seeing too much of this part anyway, so this works. Straighten that out. So you can see all these nulls, and then let's dive into this. Okay, so we've got all these joints, and then the nulls that are controlling the tracer. And I actually didn't do a spline warp, it's just a tracer because I just needed a line, and yeah, have it rendering as a hair with an Octane tag. So that's how I achieved that. Okay, let's go back in. So you can see that there's all these nulls are just nestled in under joints, and that's why the line will move with the bend. And then I've got a bunch of nulls up here to control the end of the line when I'm casting out, and one specifically that has the hook in it, so I can animate the hook position while it's still connected to the line. So to further explain how the tracer system works, let's go ahead and make a new project. Let's grab a null and let's change it from a dot to a triangle, and let's make it bigger. And we'll duplicate it, move it down, move this down, move this down, move this down. All right, so we've got all these nulls. Now I'm going to highlight all of them. Tracer. All right, so the tracer is already doing these. So connect all objects. Type.
Let's do a B-spline. And now let's go into, let's grab a cylinder. Let's make it smaller. Let's give it like 20 height segments, I guess. So it won't look too janky when we plug this in. And let's grab a spline warp. We're gonna throw the spline warp underneath the cylinder, and we're gonna throw the tracer into that, but then cylinder be that way. So now, ta-da, magic. I mean, it's not looking too great. Let's throw it in a subdivision surface. And using tracers with spline warps is a really nifty way to easily rig long cylindrical objects. I think it's a really great trick. We're going to jump in here, and I'm going to take a moment to talk about an Octane thing, but this is important for post. So if you don't have Octane, you can tune it out. I did just get Redshift recently, so this might exist in Redshift, but I don't know at this time because I haven't had time to learn it yet. So the cool thing about Octane, one thing I really love, is one of the render passes and the info passes, and it is called the Z depth. Now, if you use this, it's really great for when you're doing your post effects and After Effects because it allows you to create a tone mapped black to white, just grayscale image of your scene, and what is white is far away and what is black is close up. So you can use that as a quick way to create like animated fog using Trapcode Particular in After Effects, or you can use it to kind of easily mask things. That's something I use a lot, but before I jump into After Effects, I wanted to bring this up. So the Z depth, if you do have Octane and you do use this, you want to bump your max samples up to about 1,000, and you need to make sure this tone map type is set to tone mapped. By default, it's on linear, and if it's on linear, you're just going to end up with a white image, which is useless. You need a tone mapped image. Let's jump into After Effects and talk about some post effects on this. I used a lot of Z passes. I didn't do it in here, but I am using Trapcode Particular to give this hazy fogginess around the edges. This one, as I told you, uses a Z pass, which is what's creating the foggy layers that have been added, but then still letting the pole be seen. And then I used one here, but I'm not using fog in the Trapcode Particular. I'm just using floaty particles because the ocean is dirty, people, so we need to have floaties. And this is very particle heavy. So I've got the foggy, smoky, cloudlet particles with my Trapcode Particular at the bottom, which is making, the bottom look like it's very dark down there. There's not a lot of light. This is where the big sea creatures live, is down there at the bottom. So I have that. And then on top of that, I also have floaty particles as well. So this scene always takes a little while to render. Okay. And also the bonus of help hiding CC from the camera. So I didn't have to do two renders like I did for my rough. Here she comes. Okay. And I did a Z pass here, which if I go in, I can show it and solo it. So you see, this is what a Z depth pass looks like. And that's basically creating this luma matte. See, I've got a alpha, well, this is an alpha inverted matte, well, for that. And then this one here is a luma matte, which basically a luma matte is only using the white areas of the layer above it to go onto. So I've got double fog in this one. I've got the fog in the back, and then I added another fog layer to front, which is animating differently from the fog in the back. And it's creating kind of like this foggy vignette and just giving that feeling of total isolation as he's fishing away. And then for the swim by, I've got a little bit of fog in the corner because I wanted it to look like she was coming out of the murk. And then I've got some more floaty particles, of course. Gotta have the floaty particles. And then here is the money shot, which just has more floaty particles in it as she swims up to bite the hook. All right, I think that covers hook. Let's move on. So the next project I'm going to talk about is this animation I did for my mom. It is called Yellow Submarine, and it is called that because she's a music teacher, my mother, and she wanted to do something special for her graduating 8th grade class this past spring, since they couldn't actually graduate with COVID and everything. So she asked me if I would create a animation to the song Yellow Submarine, and it's her students singing the song, and I put all their photos in the windows of the submarine. Yeah, so it's just something nice my mom asked me to do, and I love my mother and she's very supportive of me, so of course I did it. I learned some new tricks while I was going through this, and the first one I'm going to show you is actually in this opening scene. If I start playing it. So the cool thing about this opening scene is the smoke in the chimneys. Now I'm getting the fog from another Z-Pass, you know, my favorite thing to do, but the smoke is actually done in post. And you're probably wondering, how the hell did I do that? So I'm using Trapcode Particular. If you're not very familiar with Trapcode Particular in After Effects, is that it will emit from lights, and you can import lights from your Cinema 4D file. And if those lights are all named emitters, you can tell Trapcode Particular to emit from them. There are a couple downsides of this. While the smoke will track perfectly in the place that you have them in your Cinema 4D file, they will come out on top of other objects. So I did have to create a matte, which I'll go in here, and you can see like that's the matte for the leaves in the beginning. And I always like to use fuchsia on my mattes because then it's an obscene color, and you know, I don't know, it's just something I do. I always use magenta or fuchsia, whatever you want to call it, hot pink. I always use hot pink for my mattes, so that just helps me know by looking at my scene. So see, I even labeled the layer as fuchsia. So let's go back again. But to also help with that, I also animated the intensity of some of the lights, and by animating the intensity, it will then the smoke will start to come out, as Trapcode Particular will work with intensity of the light. So if the light is at a 0 intensity, it's not going to start emitting until it gets up from 0. So let's jump over into the Cinema 4D file, and I can show you more of this. Let me jump out of the camera. All right. So I actually only modeled one house and just threw it into a cloner. The tree is actually just a model that I downloaded, a free one, because, you know, I was doing this for my mom and I needed to do it as quickly as possible. So you can see there's a light there, smoke emitters. So I put all of the lights into a smoke emitters null just for organizational purposes, and I named them all emitters, so that way when I imported them into After Effects I didn't have to rename all of them. And I just, you know, put them in some random ones. So you can see how that works. Let's go ahead and create a new project. Just create a light. Let's just do this the quickest way possible. So call this emitter, and let me grab a camera. All right, so I'm in the camera. I've got this emitter. Now we can either move the camera or we can move the emitter. What if we did both? Let's have the emitter. Let me switch to 24 frames per second. Let's make this like 150. That should be long enough. All right, so let's have the emitter start here, and let's have it at like 48 frames. Come on, 48 frames. Let's have it over here. And at 24, let's bring it up. Just gonna throw the camera in a null. Let's pop out of the camera. All right, so the null is gonna be here, and at 48, let's have it go like through. Let's hop back into the camera. All right, so that'll get an idea. All right, file, save project as. Save this as emitter test. Okay, let's go into After Effects, file, new project. Don't need to save this. Now let's make a new composition. Sure. And let's grab that Cinema 4D file. So emitter test. Bring that in. I'm going to drop that into the comp. I'm going to extract. So it then pulls the camera and the emitter out for me. Then I just kind of get rid of that. So we've got this. You can see the emitter is moving. My camera is also moving. Let's make a new layer, new solid. Sure, it can be lime green, whatever, doesn't matter. All right, let's go to Trapcode Particular. Emitter is going to be lights. So now it's emitting from the light. And we're moving through it with the camera. Alright, let's turn the velocity down to like 20. Let's make the emitter size much smaller so it's more focused. There we go. So now it's kind of like a shooting star. I could dive really deep into all the different kinds, but if you go into particle, there's so many different kinds of particles you can use. Right now it's a sphere. We can do a streaklet. It's a little bit different. You could use a cloudlet, which is what I use on the smoke. And you can bump up size randomness, which always makes it look more interesting. You can do all sorts of different colors. If I just put it to overlight, it's gonna default to this rainbow color ramp that it's in there. You can change the color ramp. It doesn't have to be rainbow. But as you can see, there's a lot of things you can do. So like say you had something flying around in Cinema 4D, you could render that out and you'd have a mask, and then you could import the light data if you put a light like on that, and you just don't actually have the light emitting in Cinema 4D, you just use it for its position data. And then you could add like a trail or something behind it. So that's a cool idea. But then also, as I used it with the chimneys, and I have actually used this to create trails in a project before. But yeah, so that is my Trapcode Particular tip that you can use in combination with your Cinema 4D renders. So let me know if you have any questions about that during the Q&A or if this doesn't make sense. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is my animated kelp. Now, I did make this kelp with X particles, but I did some research and development for you guys, and I figured out how to do it without it, just for you. So let's go into Cinema 4D, and Hook is still open. So, new project. I'm going to show you how to make kelp with hair. Okay, So let's grab a cylinder, and we're gonna make the cylinder only like 5. Sure, 5, and we're gonna make it tall because we're making giant kelp, and we only want 5 rotation segments. Height segments, we're gonna want a lot more height segments, and so I can actually see what's happening. Quick shading and lines. Okay, that looks pretty good. That's good enough for this. Okay, so let's make this editable. Let's go into our selection, and I'm gonna uncheck only select visible elements, so that way I can just select everything that I want to, and I'm gonna up my selection size. Hello. Oh yeah, I need to be in polygon selection mode. This is what I want. All right, I'll select to about there. And yeah, I could do a loop selection tool, but then I'd have to click all of them, and this is just a faster way to do it. And I'm trying to do this quickly because I've still got another project to show you guys. Okay, made the selection. Okay, cool. Select, set selection. I'm gonna call this hair because I like to label everything. All right, that's hair. Now we'll go into simulate. Hair objects, add hair. Cool. Okay, now in the hairs, we are going to change it to polygon area, polygon center. Let's go polygon area. That's what I did last time when I did my test to make sure this would work. All right, hairs, we don't need that many. Let's go with 500. Length 50. Okay, now I'm going to jump over to my hair kelp test that I had already done, and I'm going to grab the leaf I already built for time saving sake, and then you get a preview of what's going to happen. All right, where is the leaf? There's my leaf. Okay, I'm going to turn the leaf on so you can see it. Super simple. I modeled it off a plane. I made it pointy. I kept it thin because these are going to be going under the hairs, and I always try to keep the polygons low. All right, so I need to actually say a thank you to, let me pull the window over, because I figured this out actually because of another Maxon presenter, Yambo. Yeah, he actually talked about you can generate things onto hairs, and this is actually, like, I watched this and I found that fascinating, and this is how I realized I could take the kelp that I had made with X particles and make it for you guys to not use X particles at all and still work well. All right, so we have our leaf and we have our hair, and we go into generate, and we're gonna go to instance, and then we're gonna grab the leaf into the object in the instance. Now it's gonna look funny. So we'll go back in here, access, we want X, and we're gonna leave that there. Now let's go into our hair shader. I'm gonna pull out. So you can see they're there, but they're very thin. So on the thickness, well, let's make the root like 10, and there we go. We've got leaves now, people. Look at that. And if let me hide this leaf because we don't need to see it. I hold down Alt, and if you click, then it'll do both of them at the same time. Just a little tip. All right, I'm gonna press play, and look, they all fall, which isn't what we want, but hey, they're dynamic, they're moving. Cool. All right, so on the hair, let's go into dynamics and forces. That's actually what I want. And the gravity, I'm gonna turn it to 0. So now it's going to do nothing. That's okay, because now we're going to go into simulate forces, and we're going to add wind. I'm going to take this wind, I'm going to move it down, I'm going to rotate it up, holding down shift at 90 degrees. Now I'm going to press play, and now they're going to go up. So we're going in the right direction. Okay, now I'll go back to simulate forces and let's add some turbulence. And we're gonna bring the scale up and let's press play and see what happens. And hey, look at that. We've got kelp. All right, I'm going to Control D. I'm going to change this to 24 because that's normally what I work in. And let's bring this up to like 300. So we have a longer time. All right. Da 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 da. We've got nice looking undulating kelp, and this is with using the hair, it actually creates a really nice randomness, which I like. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'm going to select the hair and I'm going to do bake as a limbic. Now it's going to want me to save. I'm going to save it in here. Do. And there we go. Now I've got that. I'm going to grab it out. I'm going to group these and call it giant kelp. Okay. Delete that. Don't need that. I'm going to group these and hide them. And press play and see it's still working. Let's go ahead and change this back to just quick shading, so that way we don't have all those lines everywhere. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna move this down. Call this working. Okay, so one thing I'm definitely gonna want on the cylinder, I'm gonna want a subdivision surface. I'm gonna drop that under there just to help clean that up a bit, because you know it wasn't looking nice. All right, now let's grab a cloner. This is my favorite thing to do with alembics, is that you can throw them in a cloner. Come on, why aren't you? There we go. All right, so then we have a field of kelp and we play it, but they're all moving at the same time. What do we do? Well, if you make another one, and this one on the alembic, I'm going to offset it by 20 frames. And then let's press play and see what happens. So now we've got a little bit of randomness. Let's add some more. Random effector. Random effector. I don't want affecting Y. Let's up the variation on the X and the Z, and let's add some rotation. Not that one. Not that one either. It's always the last one I pick. Let's do like 200. Okay. And I'll press play. And if you want to add even more variation, you can then just create a couple more duplicates of the alembic and just give them different offsets. But this is a pretty quick way to be able to create a kelp field that's different, and we can just keep adding to it, make it nice and big. Yeah. So that is how you can make animated giant kelp without X particles. All right, let's check out my Unoma Black Magic lipstick animation. All right, so that is my Uoma Black Magic Carnival lipstick piece. This piece was inspired by an impulse purchase of this lipstick, which I've got the radio going on in the background. Let me turn that off. So this lipstick, I just wanted to pull this up so you could see that it is indeed super duper sparkly. I own a lot of lipsticks. I actually counted in preparation for this presentation because I was curious of how many I actually had, and I have over 20. I know, that's crazy. So anyway, I bought this lipstick because it was 50% off, and I ordered it online, and none of the online pictures did it justice. So I looked at this and I was like, this would be a really fun challenge to try to recreate the super sparkly texture. So I did. I started off first by just modeling the lipstick, and I had already modeled a lipstick before for Lipstick Day last year, just for practice and for fun. So I used that as a jumping off point. And here, I'm going to press play and just let it go through. Yeah, so I used X particles for the glitter. There's my feathers. The camera's moving in. The lipstick is floating up and opening up. And you can see there's my other camera that I cut to for the close-up shot, because that's where it gets really interesting. So that is actually a light, which is how I get that really great glint there. And I tried to just do this with texture, but I ended up just making a cloner with tiny little glittery particles that I put all over the lipstick. I'm gonna keep playing. Do-do-do-do-do. Now we're getting to the part where we pull out. So I honestly didn't really have a plan when I started this. It all started as a modeling exercise, and then I was like, oh, maybe I can come up with a way to animate this. And I mean, it's Carnival, so glitter and feathers, obviously. And there was that moment where I realized I could make feathers with hair. And this is where the other lipstick starts to come in. So how I did that was I actually just animated the first one first, and then I duplicated it, moved it back, and let me hide X particles, and there's lipstick control 1, and that is my supporting lipstick in the back. So it's actually animated with a scale right here. So that's an easy way to make something appear. And since it's right behind the other one, you don't know that it's just appearing there, just popping in. And then I just, tweaked its main animation a bit because I wanted it kind of mirroring the placement of this one. And then I just had to tweak the texture to the other color of lipstick that is in this specific line. So let's check out my feathers. So the feather itself is actually just a cylinder that I added a taper onto. And I have a selection for the hair. If I go into polygon selection, you'll see. So I only grew hair on the edges, and then it was just a lot of brushing to get it to that look. And for rigging, I turned off the dynamics of the hair. I didn't want them moving around or hanging around like actual hair. I needed them to feel weightless and fluffy. So I turned out the dynamics, but I kept their collisions. So they're rigid, but collisions. So dynamics are still technically enabled. Did I just not? No, yeah. So they're rigid. So that keeps them from falling if you turn the rigid on. But then if they hit something, they'll still move. And I had hair tags on the lipstick just in case one of them brushed by. So I animated all the feathers by hand. There was no simulation done there. And I also threw a bend deformer, which is what, and I want to go the other direction, which just helped to give the feathers that bend, because I needed to have a bend. Feathers aren't perfectly straight. We're going to make a feather super quick. Let's grab a cylinder. Cool. Let's make it 3 centimeters radius. Let's make it 500 tall. Let's bump the height segments up to 5. Rotation segments are fine. Now let's go and add a taper. Fit to parent. Turn up the strength a bunch. All right. Current state to object. Let's lose the editable stuff. That's selected. Let's go into polygon selection mode. Select, we're gonna want loop selection, as it'll save time. Where is a break? There's a break. Okay, let's do 3. Because I did a loop, it selected them on the other side. Let's zoom back out. Go back into just our regular selection tool. I'm going to turn off only select visible elements. Let's up the radius to 50 so I don't lose anything. Holding control, I deselect everything on the bottom. Nothing there underneath, nothing on the other side. Select, set selection. We're going to call this hair. Now, with that still selected, we'll go into simulate, hair, objects, add hair. There we have hair. Okay, we're gonna up the guides to up them to 200. And we're gonna have them coming out of polygon area. I can see more of what's happening on the feather. We're going to turn on bend in the material. There's bend, there's bend. In the thickness, that's going to change this to 0.5. So we want them to be thin. Now with that selected, let's go back into simulate, hair tools, brush. That's selected. I'll look from the front of the hair-ish, and I'm gonna start just brushing them up a bit, getting a nice curve to the hairs. We're just working very quickly, and now let's start pulling them back. Brushy, brushy, brush. Let's do that on the other side. You don't want to be too severe with the feather. And remember, we want them to be fluffy. At least that's the style I was going for with these. I was kind of picturing them as cast-offs from like a boa or a costume or something. Let's go back into the hair material and let's select length. Let's do like a 50% length variation. All right, materials. Grab a glossy material. I'm going to throw it on the hair and on the cylinder. And let's throw in a gradient. Let's make it 2D vertical. And let's go blue. Oops. And minty blue. But yeah, that's a pretty good quick feather. All right, everyone, that's it for my presentation. I hope you learned something new. I'd like to, again, thank Maxon for inviting me to present today. It's been a real honor. If you'd like to follow me, my Twitter and Instagram are both at @Gibson Design. Before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to play Vidzu Media's animation reel. I would not be the animator I am today without them. Thank you.